The sea has always been a battlefield. But not every battle was fought with cannons, cutlasses, and roaring gunpowder. Sometimes the deadliest weapon wasn't forged in iron at all, it was conjured from the sky itself. Imagine being trapped on a fragile wooden ship, surrounded by nothing but endless waves. While the horizon darkens, the wind howls, and the ocean rises against you. To most sailors, a storm was pure terror, an act of God to be survived. But to pirates, a storm could be turned into an ally, a weapon of chaos they knew how to wield. What if I told you that some of the most cunning pirate victories didn't rely on brute force, but on mastering the unpredictable fury of the weather? Pirates were not just raiders, they were students of the sea. And unlike the rigid naval fleets that often chased them, bound by orders and formations, pirates were free to bend, adapt, and twist strategy to their will. They learned to read the clouds as if they were maps, to sense the pressure in the air like an early warning system, to position themselves so storms became traps rather than prisons. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? Yet again and again, history whispers stories of these seaborne predators using the wrath of nature itself to crush enemies, escape pursuit, or dominate trade routes. Before we dive deeper into these forgotten tactics, let me quickly remind you of stories like this grip you. If you love uncovering hidden truths about the age of piracy, then give this video a like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow, and it means I can keep bringing you more secrets from the golden age of the seas. Now, let's step back for a moment. Picture the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th centuries. This wasn't the calm, tourist-drenched paradise you see today. It was a deadly chessboard of wind patterns, shifting currents, and violent storms that could tear apart fleets in minutes. Pirates didn't have satellites, forecasts, or barometers, but they had something far more primal: instinct, sharpened by survival. They could read the color of the sky, the tilt of the waves, the sudden silence of birds. These details told them when storms were brewing, how violent they might be, and from which direction the winds would lash out. And when others panicked, pirates schemed. One of the most ruthless ways pirates weaponized weather was during pursuit. Picture a naval frigate chasing a smaller pirate sloop. On paper, the Navy should win more guns, sturdier hull, better discipline. But the pirate captain, knowing a squall was brewing, would deliberately steer into dangerous waters, into zones where wind and current could flip the advantage. The heavier frigate might struggle to maneuver, while the lighter pirate vessels skipped across the waves, using gusts to slingshot forward. And when the storm struck full force, the disciplined lines of the Navy collapsed into chaos. In that chaos, pirates thrived. Storms also offered the ultimate cover. A pirate ship could vanish into sheets of rain, disappear behind rolling thunderclouds, and reappear miles away. To the merchant they hunted, a sudden storm might feel like salvation until the clouds broke just enough for black sails to emerge from the mist. Guns ready, crew screaming for plunder. To the Navy, storms were nightmares of lost visibility, scattered squadrons, and the ever-present fear of wreckage on unseen reefs. To pirates, storms were cloaks of invisibility, weapons of surprise. But perhaps the most chilling element was how storms shaped psychology. Sailors in that era were deeply superstitious. They feared curses, omens, and divine punishment. When pirates seemed to steer storms to their advantage, it didn't just look like skill, it looked like sorcery. Rumors spread that pirates could summon weather, that they had pacts with the devil or witches who whispered winds into their sails. Think about the terror of facing an enemy not only ruthless with blades, but seemingly favored by nature itself. Would you fight harder, or would you surrender before the battle even began? Pirates understood this fear. They nurtured it, exaggerated it, made it part of their legend. One striking example comes from the tales surrounding Black Sam Bellamy, a pirate whose career was short but meteoric. Bellamy commanded a fleet that seemed to appear and vanish across the Atlantic like a phantom. Merchants whispered that he could ride the storms, turning gales into highways while his enemies found only wreckage. Was it true? Probably not in any magical sense. But his mastery of reading the weather gave birth to a reputation that spread faster than cannon fire. That reputation made resistance feel futile before battles even started. Yet storms weren't only for escape or intimidation. They were weapons of timing. Pirates often lay in wait near hurricane zones, knowing that storms scattered convoys and left survivors vulnerable. After a tempest, battered ships limped along the currents, sails torn, crews exhausted. For a pirate ship lying in ambush, this was easy prey, like a wolf finding wounded deer after a lightning strike in the forest. But there's another layer here that makes the story more fascinating. Pirates didn't only rely on raw instinct, they exploited the weaknesses of their enemies. Navies and merchant companies followed strict routes, chosen not only for speed, but for predictability. These routes often passed through areas notorious for storms. Pirates, unbound by charts and orders, lurked nearby, knowing that a storm would eventually scatter their prey directly into their jaws. In other words, pirates weaponized not just the weather itself, but the rigidity of their enemies' routines. Think about the deeper implication here. Weather as a weapon wasn't just about reading clouds, it was about turning unpredictability into strategy. Naval captains dreaded the uncontrollable. Pirates thrived in it. Where discipline and structure broke down, piracy adapted and flexed. And that difference in mindset was often decisive. One of the most brutal examples comes from the Indian Ocean, where monsoons dictated the rhythm of trade. Merchants and navies knew the winds changed seasonally, shaping when and how they sailed. Pirates like Henry Every exploited this knowledge. He didn't just stumble upon treasure. He calculated where ships would be when storms or shifting winds slowed them down, leaving them vulnerable. It was meteorology turned into predation centuries before meteorology became a science. Well, let's step into the minds of those who lived through it. Imagine being a young sailor on a merchant ship, already half-starved and exhausted when the storm begins. Rain lashes your eyes, sails rip, thunder shakes the planks beneath your feet. You pray the storm passes, and when it does, just as the sun pierces through the breaking clouds, a darker shadow looms behind you. A pirate ship, untouched, charging with terrifying precision. What would that do to your spirit? That was the horror pirates unleashed, again and again. Of course, there's a cruel irony in all of this. Weather was not a tame ally. Pirates who gambled with storms sometimes paid with their lives. Bellamy himself, the so-called Prince of Pirates, met his end in 1717 when his ship, the Whydah, was wrecked by a violent storm off Cape Cod. Nearly all aboard drowned. For every tale of weather-born triumph, there are whispers of pirates swallowed whole by the very forces they tried to master. Yet that balance of risk and reward was part of piracy's essence. Pirates didn't seek safety. They sought opportunity, even if it meant dancing with death. And isn't that what made them so terrifying? The Navy feared storms as disasters. Pirates saw storms as chances. That mental shift turned nature into an arsenal. And when you think about it, that philosophy still resonates today. How often do we see people who collapse in the face of chaos and others who find ways to twist chaos into victory? Pirates lived that lesson in the most brutal theater imaginable, the open sea. But let's push deeper. Weather as a weapon wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was about deception. Pirates might wait for dark, stormy nights to strike, knowing the rolling thunder and sheets of rain would mask their approach. Lanterns dimmed, sails blackened, they became phantoms. For a victim ship, the first warning of an attack might not be the sight of sails, but the sudden roar of cannon fire through the storm. That fusion of weather and warfare was psychological theater as much as physical. And then there's the sheer audacity. Survive of pirates deliberately chasing storms, steering into them while their enemies hesitated. To bystanders, it looked like madness. But in those moments, pirates made themselves unpredictable. And unpredictability is the essence of terror. The age of piracy was full of brutality, greed, and violence. But beneath it all was a strange kind of genius. Pirates were not merely thugs on water. They were opportunists who saw what others feared and asked, "How can I use this? How can I twist disaster into power?" And the answer, time and again, was the weather itself. There's a legend told in hushed tones among old sea records, one that captures the audacity of pirates and their strange partnership with storms. It's the story of a Spanish treasure galleon, overloaded with silver and gold from the New World, attempting to outrun a brewing tempest off the Florida coast. The galleon was massive, a floating fortress built to intimidate. But its size was its curse. Heavy and sluggish, it wallowed in the rising waves, struggling against the wind. Trailing behind, in its shadow, a smaller pirate sloop followed. To the Spanish, the pirates seemed suicidal. Who would dare hunt treasure in the jaws of a storm? But the pirates understood what the Spaniards didn't. As the winds howled, the larger galleon became a liability to itself. Its bulk couldn't ride the swells. It pitched and rolled, sails straining, masts groaning. The pirates, with their lighter frame, cut across the waves like predators chasing wounded prey. By the time the storm struck at full force, the Spanish crew was half paralyzed with fear, their massive ship nearly breaking apart. And in that chaos, the pirates attacked, not with a full-scale assault, but with precision. Grappling hooks flew across rain-slicked decks. Gunpowder roared despite the downpour. And within hours, the pirates had claimed the treasure. When the storm cleared, the Spanish fleet was in shambles, and the survivors swore the pirates had conjured the weather itself. Stories like this spread faster than any ship could sail. They didn't just describe victories, they built a mythology. Pirates weren't simply fighters. They were forces of nature, and this mythology was itself a weapon. Every sailor who believed it gave pirates an advantage before steel ever clashed. Fear turned into surrender, and surrender meant bloodless plunder. Pirates didn't need to kill everyone. They just needed people to believe resistance was hopeless. But not all tactics were as dramatic. Sometimes weather was used in small, calculated ways. For instance, pirates were masters at using prevailing winds to time ambushes. The Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and the African coast all had trade wind steady air currents that guided merchant ships along predictable paths. Pirates learned not only where these ships would be, but when they would be weakest. If a convoy sailed against the wind, its ships slowed, straining to make progress. That's when pirates struck, sweeping in with the wind at their backs, gaining speed and momentum while their prey struggled helplessly forward. This wasn't just clever sailing. It was asymmetrical warfare centuries before the term existed. Pirates knew they couldn't match the firepower of great empires, but they didn't need to. By making the weather itself their ally, they tilted the battlefield in ways their enemies never expected. And yet, this reliance on storms created a strange paradox. Pirates both revered and feared the skies. Superstition was baked into their culture. Crews often had strict rules about whistling on deck for fear it would summon winds too strong. Many believed in weather witches, women who could charm or curse the winds. Some pirates even carried small charms or bones, believing they gave them control over storms. Were these just silly beliefs? Maybe. But when you gamble your life on the sea, you cling to any edge you can imagine. And in a way, those beliefs made sense psychologically. If you believed you had control, you sailed bolder. And boldness often meant victory. Let's pause here for a second and look at the bigger picture. Why did pirates succeed where navies often stumbled? It wasn't just skill, it was mindset. Naval commanders, bound by tradition, dreaded the uncontrollable. They trained to fight in neat lines, to calculate battle in ordered ways. Storms broke those patterns apart, scattering fleets, smashing formations, silencing discipline. Pirates embraced that chaos. They didn't need lines. They thrived in improvisation. It's the same principle you see in guerrilla warfare on land, small forces using the environment to make larger, structured armies stumble. At sea, the weather was that environment. This becomes even clearer when you look at the golden age of piracy through the lens of timing. The early 1700s were marked by constant storms in the Caribbean, hurricanes that wrecked Spanish treasure fleets again and again. For pirates, these weren't tragedies, they were opportunities. When the great Spanish treasure fleet of 1715 was shattered by a hurricane, wrecking 11 galleons off the Florida coast, pirates rushed like vultures. Survivors tried to salvage silver from the wrecks, but soon the beaches swarmed with raiders, stripping gold from the sand and holding salvage crews at gunpoint. To the world, this was disaster. To pirates, it was harvest season. Think about what this means. The line between natural disaster and pirate strategy blurred. Storms did the heavy lifting, smashing ships, scattering survivors, stripping fleets of their defenses. Pirates simply moved in afterward, taking treasure without firing a shot. In a way, nature itself became their deadliest weapon, and they knew it. But storms weren't just for plunder, they were also for escape. There are records of pirates deliberately sailing into bad weather, knowing their pursuers would hesitate. Imagine being a naval captain, ordered to hunt down a pirate crew. You're closing in, victory in sight. Then the pirate ship veers straight into a black wall of storm clouds. Do you follow? If you do, you risk your entire crew and vessel for the chance of a capture. If you don't, the pirates vanish and your mission fails. Again and again, navies turned back. Pirates didn't need to fight if they could make the ocean itself their shield. But this brings us to a fascinating question. Were pirates truly weather masters, or did they just exploit luck and reputation? The answer lies somewhere in between. Pirates weren't magicians, but they were incredible observers. They lived at sea constantly, unlike many naval officers who rotated between land and ship. Pirates noticed details: the smell of ozone before lightning, the way swells shifted under the moon, the strange silence that falls before a gale. Over time, these instincts became second nature. And in a world without forecasting, instinct could feel like sorcery. And it wasn't just instincts. Pirates also stole knowledge. Many captured ships carried charts, logs, and journals mapping wind patterns and storm routes. Pirates used this information, learning trade winds, monsoon cycles, and hurricane seasons. They turned stolen knowledge into tactical advantage. What better weapon than the secrets of the very fleets you hunted? There's one story that captures this perfectly. In 1695, the infamous Henry Every lay in wait off the coast of Arabia, targeting Mughal treasure fleets. He knew exactly when the monsoon winds would shift, slowing ships departing India. He wasn't guessing, he had studied their patterns. And when the Mughal fleet finally sailed, burdened by shifting winds, Every struck. His capture of the Gangaseoy, one of the richest prizes in pirate history, wasn't luck. It was a calculated strike, made possible by weaponizing seasonal weather. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Storms killed pirates as often as they saved them. The ocean was merciless. One wrong call, one misjudged wind, and a pirate ship could splinter into driftwood. Crews feared sudden squalls as much as their enemies did. Yet that gamble was part of piracy's essence. Where others saw certain death, pirates saw potential victory. And in that razor-thin margin between genius and suicide, legends were born. But there's a deeper lesson here, one that goes beyond the waves. What pirates really mastered wasn't whether it was adaptability. They weren't stronger. They weren't better armed. They weren't more numerous. What they had was flexibility. And storms were the ultimate test of flexibility. To turn a storm into an ally meant embracing uncertainty, bending with it rather than breaking. Isn't that the essence of survival itself? Those who fear chaos are destroyed by it. Those who use it thrive. Pirates didn't just fight their enemies. They fought the very idea of control itself. And perhaps this is why their stories still resonate today. We live in a world that craves certainty forecasts, routines, predictable outcomes. But life, like the sea, is anything but predictable. Storms always come. The question is, do you let them break you, or do you learn to ride their fury? Pirates, for all their brutality, embodied that second choice. They turned storms into strategy, fear into power, chaos into opportunity. Imagine that final moment, standing on a creaking deck, lightning splitting the sky, the horizon swallowed by waves. You know death is near, but instead of cowering, you grin because you see something your enemies don't. The storm isn't the end, it's the beginning of your advantage. That's what it meant to be a pirate who wielded weather as a weapon. There's a haunting irony in all of this. The same storms that made pirates terrifying also brought many of them to ruin. When you look at records of pirate deaths, it's not always swords or cannons that end them midst the sea itself. Entire crews wiped out not in glorious battle, but swallowed whole by waves. Dragged under by winds they thought they could control. The very weapon they wielded turned like a serpent against its master. Take the fate of Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, perhaps the most successful pirate of the Golden Age. While he didn't die in a storm, many of his ships and allies did. His empire was constantly threatened by the uncontrollable moods of the ocean. In letters and records, you find mentions of storms that scattered his fleet, separating him from allies and costing him ships without a single shot fired. Weather was never a loyal servant, it was a beast, unpredictable and wild. Pirates only borrowed its strength, never owned it. And yet, they kept gambling. Why? Because pirates understood something profound. Power often lies in what others fear most. To the average sailor, storms meant paralysis, despair, the urge to cling to safety. To pirates, storms were cracks in the armor of the mighty. Where kings saw disasters, pirates saw opportunities. And that attitude, the ability to flip fear into advantages, why their stories linger centuries later. Think of the naval commanders who pursued them. These men represented the world's greatest empires, armed with money, fleets, and authority. Yet time and again, they were humiliated by ragged outlaws with ships half their size. Why? Because pirates fought in partnership with an ally the empires could never command. They didn't just fight ships. They'd fought with storms, with winds, with currents. They didn't obey the sea, they adapted to it. That adaptability was deadlier than any cannon. There's another layer too, the theater of weather. Pirates didn't just use storms tactically, they used them theatrically. Picture a black-sailed brig emerging from thunderclouds, lightning flashing behind it, rain pouring down. To a terrified merchant crew, that image wasn't just frightening, it was biblical. It looked like doom itself was coming for them. Pirates knew that every legend, every exaggeration, every whispered rumor of storm-riding sorcery made their job easier. If people surrendered before the fight began, the battle was already won. This blending of nature, psychology, and violence is what makes piracy so fascinating. They weren't scientists, they weren't meteorologists, but they understood human fear better than most rulers of their age. They learned that you, Dante, need to control a storm, you only need to look like you do. And in the minds of their enemies, that illusion was often stronger than truth. Of course, the storm itself had no loyalty. The Weaponized Bellamy's ship is the starkest example. Loaded with plunder, powerful and feared. It was ripped apart in a single night off Cape Cod. Almost every man aboard drowned, their treasures scattered across the ocean floor. For centuries, pieces of that wreck have washed ashore, silent reminders of nature's final say. The pirates may have wielded storms as weapons, but in the end, the sea always took back what was hers. Still, the image of pirates riding storms lives on, not because they conquered weather, but because they dared to use it. They dared to step where others shrank away. And that daring spirit is what captivates us even now. We don't admire pirates for their cruelty or greed. We remember them for their defiance for turning chaos itself into an ally. And maybe there's a lesson in that for us today. Life will always bring storms, chaos, setbacks, disasters. None of it can be avoided. Most people freeze when that happens. They panic, they crumble, they cling to safety. But some, like the pirates of old, see storms differently. They see storms as openings, as moments to move, to strike, to change course when others can't. They ride the fury instead of fleeing it. The truth is, pirates weren't superhuman. They didn't control the weather. What they controlled was their response to it. They turned uncertainty into strategy, terror into weaponry, storms into shields. And that mindset, the mindset of turning fear into fuel, is why their stories still matter. So the next time you hear thunder rolling or watch waves crashing on a shore, think about those ragged men with black flags who faced the same chaos but saw opportunity instead of doom. Think about the sailors who swore pirates could conjure storms with a whisper, and the terrified crews who surrendered at the first flash of lightning. And remember that behind the legends, there was a simple, powerful truth. Weather may be uncontrollable, but how you use it is everything. That's the legacy of pirates who weaponized storms. Not that they defeated nature, but that they dared to make nature part of their war. And that's why, centuries later, we still whisper their names with awe, fear, and fascination. Because in the end, pirates remind us of something universal. The storm itself doesn't choose sides, but those who dare to ride it can change history. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden side of piracy, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this.